This week's episode of PokeClass is sponsored by Collector's Cash, your #1 place to go for all your single cards and sealed products. Make sure you check them out after the show at www.collectorscash.com. Hey everyone, and welcome to episode 101 of PokeClass, where today I'm heading back to good old deck analysis, which will probably be my last one before Plasma Storm comes out, but more about that will be coming later next month. However, today's deck analysis is the result of something I watched the other day, and the results of a particular regional championships over in the US. The Mississippi Regional Championships were streamed live on Twitch, thanks to the guys over at the Top Cut, and I joined to watch most of the Swiss rounds and then the Top Cut the next day, and I must say that the decks being played were incredibly interesting. First off, we had a fair few rogue decks making a name for themselves. The notables were a Mewtwo Garbodor deck in the top 8, and the deck I'm going to be talking about today making half of the top 4 and making it to the finals as well. As mentioned in episode 100 of PokeClass, Blastoise Keldeo had won 25% of the city championships played in the US, which is a huge number, and the field for Mississippi also had a lot of Blastoise in it too, which caused a fair few people to play this very deck I'll talk about today. And the deck is Garbodor, one that I did a deck analysis for a while back now, but I feel that the format has changed a lot and Garbodor can deal a lot more hurt this time around, so this is the deck I'm going to be analysing today, but with a bit of a twist. The twist is that what did so well at Mississippi was Garbodor paired with both Mewtwo EX and Landorus EX, the two main EXs out there at the moment, to combat what was doing well at the tournament. The Mewtwo was for the Blastoise matchup to take down opposing Mewtwo's and Keldeo's, and the Landorus was for Darkrai and for also knocking out multiple Squirtles at a time thanks to Garbodor shutting off its amazing ability. So enough of the background of the deck and on to the main players. So your main man in the deck is Garbodor, and he is a stage 1 psychic type with a single ability and attack, 100 HP, double psychic weakness and a fairly hefty 3 retreat cost. So at first glance this guy isn't looking too hot for competitive play, but I did mention his ability and that is the sole reason that you play this in the deck. Garbodor's ability is called Garbotoxin and it reads, if Garbodor has a Pokemon tool card attached to it, each Pokemon in play in both sides of the field, in hand and in the discard pile has no abilities. So whenever Garbodor has a tool attached to it, neither player's Pokemon can use any abilities regardless of where it is on the field, apart from Garbodor of course. So if you think to all of the big players in the format, Keldeo EX, Darkrai EX, Hydreigon, Electric, Blastoise and even the likes of Squirtle, they will all be shut off by Garbodor, which is a crazy thought. If all of the decks that these Pokemon are involved in can't use their abilities, they are pretty much stuck for the entire game. The main deck Garbodor is out to get, as mentioned earlier, is Blastoise, as it has been running rampant over the city's period, and if you imagine a Blastoise deck without the use of Deluge, and maybe more importantly Rush In, what can Blastoise even do? Most Blastoise decks at the times of this regionals didn't run any switch, as Keldeo has it as a built-in power, and they also didn't really run Tool Scrapper, as you can two-shot all EXs in the format regardless of Eviolite anyway, and Garbodor didn't really seem to be a big threat. So these two factors are what Garbodor can really capitalise on, and even with the likes of Tool Scrapper, you can still get going with this big pile of garbage. So now you know the main strategy behind the deck, you're going to need some attackers to really capitalise on your opponent's slowness, and the ones we've chosen are Mewtwo EX and Landorus EX. Mewtwo has been in the format for so long now that hopefully you do know what it does, but its main role is just to take on these Keldeo and opposing Mewtwo your opponent will be playing, as we've seen a slight rise in numbers that people are playing, with most playing either 2 or 3 at the moment. Another thing that Mewtwo is great for is early pressure, which is really what you want from your attackers in this deck, as you can get your lockdown early, slowing your opponent down to a halt, and you need to capitalise on this as soon as possible, which Mewtwo and Landorus both help you to do. Which brings me on to Landorus EX, your second attacker and another one that can leap out from the first turn and take prizes from the get-go. Landorus may seem to be a strange choice when it comes to wanting to beat down a Keldeo Blastoise deck. With that Garbodor lock in place, the opponent's chance of getting a fast Keldeo is much less, and you can start knocking out 2 Squirtles at a time thanks to Hammerhead. The advantage you get from shutting off Squirtle's ability and being able to take 2 prizes in one go, and at the same time stopping Blastoise coming into play, really lessens the fact that Landorus is weak to water. This fast attacking and spread damage can really allow you to capitalise games, even more so in an Eels or Darkrai matchup because of hitting for double weakness, and Land's Judgment is a great game finisher too. So now you know what's going on in the deck, let's take a look at the skeleton list to get you started on building this deck. So the first thing is the Pokemon line, which begins with a 3-2 Garbodor, which I think may seem a little low, but with all the search and recovery that you have available in the deck, this should be enough to last you the game. You could go up to a 3-3 line if you really feel that you want to be able to draw into Garbodor more often, rather than searching it out, and obviously, this is your main strategy maker, so the decision is up to you. After that are your 3 attackers. Yep, that's right, 3. I know I only mentioned 2 in the previous section of the episode, but there is another attacker you can include to make your deck even more powerful against the likes of Darkrai, and that is Terrakion. The regular Terrakion from Noble Victories gives you the option to place it on the bench, attach an energy to it, and threaten an instant 90 damage to anything after a KO has been suffered, or 180 damage if you're hitting something like a Darkrai. This can be extremely powerful against Eels too, as you can instantly take out one of their energy accelerators, putting them in a strange position where they may think twice about taking the prize straight away. Onto your trainers cards now, and we'll start with the supporters, where we have 4 Professor Juniper and 4 N, which are pretty much staple of any deck in the format. And then we move on to 3 Skylar. I feel Skylar is fairly powerful in this deck, as it can grab you the tools you need for the lock as soon as possible, and can also provide you with that single card you need to capitalize on the turn you get the lock, to make it hurt even more on your opponent. After this, I've also placed 2 of either Bianca or Cheren, which are just extra cards to give you a little bit extra draw power. Bianca is great for the late game when your hands are generally lower, but if you like the straight power of Cheren, then go for that, but the decision is always going to be up to the player. After this, we have your big decision for the deck, the Pokemon tools you want to run, and you can have some fun with these. As Garbodor needs a tool attached for its ability to work, you'll need at least 6 in the deck to deal with stuff like Garbodor getting knocked out and Tool Scrapper. The ones I would recommend you start with are Rescue Scarf, Experience Share, and Giant Cape. Rescue Scarf is fairly obvious, as it can get your Garbodor and other Pokemon back after they've been KO'd, which is really useful for getting it straight back onto the field and continuing the lock. Experience Share is great for keeping energy on the field and getting big attacks off with Landorus or Terrakion, and it's also good for putting a Mewtwo down safely with Experience Share for a return KO in the Mewtwo War. Giant Cape is also very interesting, as it gives your Garbodor 120 HP and also gives your EXs 190 and 200 HP, which is an incredible number. Giving a Landorus 200 HP against a deck that you can't hit you for double weakness makes it tough to deal with, making it a 3-hit KO rather than a 2-hit KO, while you hit for 30 damage and 30 snipe every turn that happens. While doing this, you can set up bigger KOs around the board when your Landorus finally goes down, and it makes sure that you make your opponent work for those prizes harder than you need to. Eviolite is also an option for you, as you run so many big EXs, but I feel that Giant Cape could be better, as it almost does the same thing but can work on your Garbodors. However, try out all the tools you can and see which ones you can work best with your attackers as well as Garbodor. After the big decision, I've placed 4 Pokemon Catcher, which is always self-explanatory, and then 4 Switch, just to keep your attackers as versatile as possible. Both Landorus and Garbodor have large retreat costs, which you don't want to be paying in a deck that doesn't accelerate energy, so making sure you have the maximum amount of chance of getting them unstuck from the active spot is an obvious inclusion. Up next are your search cards for the deck, Heavy Ball and Ultra Ball. Now, I'm not too sure if the counts are correct for these yet, but you definitely need a mixture of the two to search out your attackers and support Pokemon as easily as possible. The luxury of being able to use Heavy Ball is that it has no downside, unlike Ultra Ball. However, the problem is that you can only search out Garbodor and Landorus with it. I would maybe argue that there needs to be more Ultra Ball for those Trubbish if you're finding it hard to get them out onto the field in the early game, but try this arrangement first and see if it needs changing. You could also maybe include Level Ball, but the problem with that is that it only searches out your Trubbish and nothing else, so it wouldn't be something that I would suggest. After that, you have 2 Plus Power, which could be considered as a luxury card and could be taken out for more search cards that you may need. However, Plus Power is great for giving you that extra boost in the Mewtwo War and for dealing more damage with Landorus' attacks. It's also useful for making sure that you can get KOs on Eviolited Darkrai's with Terrakion, so I would strongly suggest that you consider Plus Power in your build. The trainers cards are then followed up by Computer Search, the #1 ace-bet card at the moment, and then completed by a single Super Rod. Because you aren't running a maximum line of Garbodor in your deck, you will need Super Rod for the recovery of them if they're hitting the discard too quickly, and it can also help you to get valuable energy back in the later stages of the game. The list is then completed by 4 double colourless energy and 8 fighting, which should be enough to keep your cheap attackers going throughout the game. And that is pretty much your breakdown of Garbodor for this current format. The deck has already been proven in the competitive environment by taking many top cut places at the biggest regionals in the US so far, so definitely try it for yourself or test against it just in case you come across it in the future. As for the extra space in the list, I'm not sure what else you could place in here on top of what's already there, apart from adding in extra copies of stuff like Ultra Ball, Heavy Ball, or maybe an extra supporter just to boost consistency. Overall, the deck is pretty much the only control deck we have at the moment, so check it out if that's the kind of style you like to play, and again, definitely test against it to know what to expect. And that wraps up PokeClass episode 101, and I hope you enjoyed it. For those of you that are new to the channel, please do hit that subscribe button, and a like and a favourite will always be greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot for watching guys, and have a great week.